My name is Jean Wilson. I'm 29 years old, and the night everything cracked open didn't start with a fight. It started with a smile. It was one of those humid Saturday afternoons when the air feels too heavy to argue with. Our mutual friend Dave was hosting a small barbecue to celebrate his promotion, and I had offered to help him set up the tables and lights in his backyard. Anthony, my boyfriend of 4 years, sat slouched in a lawn chair, scrolling through his phone, sunglasses perched on his head like he was allergic to the real world. He was supposed to be helping too, but he was busy updating his story about summer vibes instead. "Hey," I called out, half teasing, half exhausted. "You could at least pretend to know how to open a bag of charcoal." He didn't look up. "I'm supervising," he said, voice dry. "You're the architect. You handle the structures." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. He always said things like that, small jokes that didn't sound like jokes. I crouched by the grill, the smell of lighter fluid sharp in the air, and muttered, "Supervising requires paying attention." Dave laughed somewhere behind me. "He's allergic to labor. Jean, don't bother." I forced a laugh too, but a flicker of irritation warmed the base of my throat. That was how things often went with Anthony and me lately, me carrying the weight, him pretending the world owed him comfort. I told myself he was just stressed about work, that he'd snap out of this cynical mood once the evening got going. That's what I'd been telling myself for months. By the time the first guests arrived, the fairy lights above us glowed gold and the smell of grilled food filled the air. I felt the tension fade a little. Music hummed softly. People laughed. It was the kind of night that usually steadied me. Until she showed up. She arrived late, Jade, Dave's new coworker. She stepped into the yard like the evening had been waiting for her. Her short red hair caught the light like flame, and when she smiled, it was as if every conversation paused to make room for her. She was the opposite of me in every way, uninhibited, loud, confident, in the kind of way that didn't need permission. Anthony's head turned before mine did. He straightened up in his chair, suddenly alert, the same way a cat reacts to movement. "I noticed, of course. You always notice when someone you love looks at someone else differently." She walked over to us, balancing a beer in one hand. "Hey, you must be Jean," she said brightly. "Dave told me you're the one with the architectural firm. That's amazing." I smiled politely. "Freelance consultant, actually, but close enough." Anthony jumped in, his tone a little too eager. "She's being modest. She's designed a few big office renovations downtown." Jade tilted her head. "Really, that's impressive. I could never do something that meticulous. I'd get bored." Anthony laughed too quickly. "Yeah, she's all about structure. I'm more the spontaneous one." The comment landed between us like a small spark on dry grass. Nobody noticed it but me. Later, as the night wore on and the drinks flowed, I stood by the fence sipping ginger ale, watching Anthony animatedly tell a story to Jade. His hands moved. The way they hadn't for me in months, expressive, alive. She leaned in close, laughing, her hand brushing his arm once, twice. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just observing, like an outsider in my own relationship. Then I heard him. He was talking to Dave, his voice casual but careless. "Jean is great. Don't get me wrong, but she's so serious all the time. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a job interview." My hand tightened around the cup. Dave muttered something I couldn't catch, but Anthony laughed. "I mean, she's sweet. Just predictable." The word stung more than I wanted to admit. Predictable. Like something you could schedule between meetings. I turned back towards the grill, pretending to check on the food. I heard Jade laugh again, light and unburdened. I stayed quiet. That's what I did best. By the time the party ended, Anthony was staying behind to help clean up. I knew what that meant. He'd linger near Jade until she gave him another reason to feel seen. He offered a quick kiss on my cheek before I left. "You okay to drive?" I smiled faintly. "Yeah, I've been okay for a while." He didn't notice the edge in my tone, or maybe he did and just didn't care. I got into my car, closed the door, and watched him through the windshield. He was laughing at something Jade said, hand resting casually on the back of her chair. I started the engine. The headlights cut across the yard, slicing through the laughter and music for just a moment. Jade looked up and waved. Anthony didn't. As I drove home, I realized something that hollowed me out from the inside. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt wanted, not just loved out of habit. The night swallowed the road ahead. The hum of the tires on asphalt sounded like breathing. By the time I reached my apartment, the air felt heavier than before. I placed my car keys on the counter and stood there in the dark, motionless. I should have cried, maybe. That's what people expect from heartbreak, the noise, the collapse. But instead, I just whispered to myself, this is how foundations crack. Not with earthquakes, just quiet pressure over time. And somewhere deep down, I knew once a crack starts, it only spreads. 2 months later, I was standing in front of a mirror that didn't feel like mine. My reflection looked fine. Hair pinned, navy dress, neat lipstick, exactly the right shade. But my eyes told the truth. They looked like someone bracing for something. Tonight was Lisa's birthday party. Anthony had insisted we go. It'll be fun, he'd said, with that careless grin that didn't reach me anymore. You've been working too much lately. In his language, working too much meant not orbiting him enough. The venue was one of those trendy loft apartments with low lights thudding bass, and a mix of laughter and ego hanging in the air. The kind of place where people shouted compliments they didn't mean. I stood near the drink table, clutching a half-empty glass of white wine, pretending to care about a conversation with a friend I barely remembered from college. Across the room, Anthony was in his element, laughing too loudly, surrounded by people who found him funny. Jade was there too, of course. She always was lately. Her red hair caught every bit of light in that dim space like a warning signal. She leaned against a counter, eyes on Anthony, as he gestured dramatically mid-story. I didn't even have to hear it, I knew the script. Anthony telling one of his career hustle stories, the audience nodding, impressed. I took a sip of my drink and forced myself to breathe evenly. It's fine, Jean, I told myself. Just get through tonight. 20 minutes later, he still hadn't looked for me. So I crossed the room, smiling like it didn't sting. Here, I said, offering him the gin and tonic he'd asked for half an hour ago. He took it without glancing at me. Thanks, babe, he muttered automatically, still mid-conversation with Jade. Something in me went still. Jade was laughing at something Anthony had said about assertiveness in business. He grinned, turning to the group. You have to know when to take control. It's survival of the fittest out there. Exactly, Jade said, eyes glinting. It's all about that alpha energy. I almost smiled at how ridiculous they both sounded. But then Anthony looked right at me, and said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, See, Jean could use a little of that. She's brilliant, but she doesn't really fight for what she wants, you know. Always too agreeable. The words sliced cleanly like a surgeon who knew where every nerve ended. Jade's laugh filled the silence. Oh, come on, she's just chill. That's nice sometimes. But Anthony wasn't done. No, really, he continued, raising his glass. She's safe, dependable, but life's not meant to be lived at room temperature, right? The group chuckled politely. Someone shifted awkwardly. I heard my own voice before I realized I'd spoken. Room temperature keeps things from breaking. Anthony blinked, thrown off, then gave me that performative smile people wear when they're embarrassed for you. Relax, babe. I'm just joking. The laughter returned, except this time I wasn't part of it. I stood there, my pulse thrumming in my ears, my drink trembling in my hand. The music muffled the laughter distant. It was just me, him, and that terrible space between us. He looked uncomfortable now, as if realizing the crowd was watching. Jean, don't make it weird. I looked at him for a long moment. His mouth kept moving words tumbling out that I couldn't hear anymore. My chest didn't hurt. It was empty, perfectly terrifyingly empty. I placed my drink on the counter beside him, my voice calm. You're right, I said softly. I don't fight for things that don't matter anymore. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? But I was already walking away. Past Jade, whose smile faltered, past the curious stares, past the sound of my own heart slowing down. The hallway was quieter, cooler. I picked up my coat from the pile on the sofa, slipped it on, and made my way toward the door. Lisa caught my arm as I passed. Her face was apologetic, uncertain. Jean, are you okay? He didn't mean. I gave her a faint smile. It's fine. He meant exactly what he said. Then I opened the door and stepped into the night. The air outside was cold enough to bite. I didn't cry. I didn't even look back. The city hummed around me, alive and different. Inside, the laughter swelled again, the party continuing as if nothing had cracked open. But something had. And as I walked to my car, the thought came clear and clean. He wanted a woman who burned for him. Now he'd see what it felt like when she went cold. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was spilling across the bed, soft and golden, the kind of light that should have made everything feel warm, but the sheets beside me were empty cold. Anthony was in the kitchen, humming off-key while frying eggs. He looked like a man in a detergent commercial, domesticated, harmless, pretending nothing had happened. Morning, he said too casually. You were pretty quiet last night. I studied him for a moment. His back was to me, his voice steady, like the party had been a dream I'd imagined. Do you remember what you said? I asked. He glanced over his shoulder, brow furrowed. At Lisa's. Yeah, I might have gone a little overboard. But come on, Jean, you know I was just joking. Jocking. The word echoed in my head like a hollow drum. He sighed, turning off the stove. You've got to stop taking everything so seriously. You embarrassed yourself walking out like that. I tilted my head, embarrassed myself. Yeah, he said like it was obvious. People were asking if we broke up or something. You made me look like a jerk. I almost laughed. You don't need help looking like a jerk, Anthony. That made him pause. Wow. Okay, you're really doing this, huh? Doing what? Being dramatic. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, wearing that half smile that used to charm me. You always do this. You shut down instead of talking. I stared at him, realizing something devastating in its simplicity. He thought I was still trying. I'm not shutting down, I said finally. I'm done. He blinked, genuinely confused. Done with what? With you. The words came out soft, like a confession, but they carried the weight of 4 years. He laughed a dry, incredulous sound. You're kidding. I shook my head. You made it clear what you value, and it's not me. Jesus, Jean, you're overreacting. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping in. It was a party. Everyone was drinking. Everyone was joking. You can't end a 4-year relationship over one bad night. I looked around the apartment. The plants I watered, the framed prints I hung, the couch I picked. Every piece of it had been built quietly by my hands, while he took up space like it was oxygen owed to him. It's not about one night, I said, my voice steady. It's about every moment you made me feel small and called it teasing. Every time you needed me to hold you up but never thought to reach for me. You've been chipping away at this for years. Last night, you just said it out loud. His mouth opened, but no words came. I picked up the suitcase I'd already packed. He hadn't noticed it by the door when he came in. You're serious? He asked, incredulous now. I nodded. I found a new place. I'll send for the rest of my things. He stepped forward, his tone turning sharp. You think you're too good for me. That's what this is. I met his gaze. No, I just think I finally see you clearly. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Unbelievable. You're running away because your feelings got hurt. You'll regret this. Maybe I said, but at least I'll regret it alone. I walked past him, the suitcase rolling behind me, its wheels whispering across the hardwood like punctuation marks. He didn't follow. Maybe he couldn't. The front door clicked shut behind me, and the silence that followed was so complete it felt sacred. The next few hours passed like a film in slow motion. I drove to a small furnished apartment across town. I'd found it weeks ago, an emergency backup plan that at the time I'd pretended was just in case. The space was tiny but clean. Blank walls, no memories, no trace of him. I unpacked quietly closed sketchbooks, a single photo of me and my mother that I placed on the nightstand. I left everything else boxed, like I was afraid to anchor myself too soon. Then I sat on the floor, back against the wall, knees drawn to my chest, and waited for the grief to arrive. It didn't. There were no tears, no breakdown. Just a stillness so deep it almost felt like peace. I checked my phone. 23 missed calls, 14 messages. Anthony. You can't just ghost me after 4 years. Anthony. Are you serious about this? Anthony. I was drunk. You're really this cold, Anthony. Wow. Unbelievable. After everything I did for you. Anthony, fine. Do whatever you want. The messages kept coming, anger bleeding into guilt into pleading. I read every one of them once. Then I turned off the phone and placed it in the drawer beside the bed. When I closed that drawer, it felt final, like sealing a tomb. I made myself a cup of tea and stood by the window, watching the city lights blink in the distance. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's girlfriend. I didn't feel like someone's emotional caretaker. I just felt like me. Freedom, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it exhales. That night, I slept better than I had in months. And in the morning, when sunlight touched my face again, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like possibility. The first message came 3 days later. A new number, no name, just words that felt too familiar. Unknown. You're really ignoring me after 4 years. Unknown. This is childish, Jean. I deleted it without replying, but the next morning there were more. Unknown. I can't sleep. I didn't mean to hurt you. Unknown. You know I say stupid things sometimes. Unknown. Can we just talk? They came one after another like waves against a rock that didn't move, and I didn't move. I went to work. I drafted blueprints, attended meetings, smiled when my coworkers spoke. But in the quiet moments between the hum of the printer and the whir of the AC, his voice echoed in my head. You embarrassed yourself. You'll regret this. Funny thing is, I didn't. I found a strange kind of peace in his absence. It was like finally being able to hear my own thoughts after years of background noise. Still, I knew the cycle. I'd seen it before. The pattern of a man who mistakes attention for affection and silence for cruelty. By the end of the week, his tone had shifted. Unknown. I can't believe you're doing this. Unknown. You're so cold. Unknown. I thought you were different. Then came guilt disguised as sentimentality. Unknown. Remember that trip to Dalat? When we got caught in the rain, unknown. You laughed so hard that day. I miss that. I miss you. I didn't respond. By the 5th day, the messages stopped. I thought maybe finally he'd run out of ways to perform regret. Then my phone rang. The caller ID said Carol Wilson Anthony's mother. For a moment, I almost let it go to voicemail, but I answered. Jean, she began, her voice sharp and rehearsed. What on earth is going on between you and Anthony? Good afternoon, Carol, I said calmly, already knowing where this was headed. He's devastated, she continued, voice trembling with controlled fury. You can't just walk out on someone after 4 years without so much as a conversation. That's cruel. I took a breath. Carol, with all due respect, it's between me and your son. Well, when my son calls me crying at midnight, it becomes my concern, she snapped. He says you're punishing him, ignoring him, refusing to even meet. I'm not punishing him, I said evenly. I'm protecting my peace. She went silent for a moment. Then, you were always too proud, Jean. That's your problem. You think being cold makes you strong. I smiled faintly. No, Carol. It makes me free. Her breath caught, and for a second I thought she might scream. Instead, she exhaled sharply. You'll regret this. Men like Anthony don't just come along every day. I almost laughed at that. You're right, I said softly. Thank God for that. Then I hung up. That night I walked to the small park across from my new apartment. The air smelled like rain, the sky bruised with clouds. I sat on a bench and watched strangers walk by, couples holding hands, kids chasing a ball, someone jogging with headphones on. For once, I didn't feel like a ghost. The next morning, the messages started again. Different tone this time. Desperation creeping through the words. Unknown. Please, Jean, just talk to me. Unknown. I'm losing my mind. Unknown. Jade isn't who I thought she was. She's intense. Aggressive. Unknown. I made a mistake. A huge one. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd spent years craving fire. Now he was getting burned. Unknown. Please just answer. You're the only person who ever made me feel safe. That word safe used to feel like an insult. Now it sounded like a confession. I didn't reply. I didn't even read the rest. I muted the number, set my phone face down on the table, and returned to my drafting board. A new client wanted a coastal retreat designed around the theme of solitude and light. As I worked, I realized how fitting that was. I spent the entire day sketching open windows and airy spaces, places where the walls didn't suffocate. The irony made me smile. When night fell, I cooked myself dinner for one. Quiet jazz filled the apartment. My reflection in the window looked calmer, older, but somehow lighter. Later, as I washed the dishes, the phone buzzed again on the counter. One more message. Unknown. I'm sorry, I just needed to say that. For a moment, I hesitated. My finger hovered over the screen. Then I hit block. The silence that followed was immediate and perfect. I turned off the lights, sat by the window again, and whispered to myself, half prayer, half realization. Some people mistake your silence for weakness, but silence is where strength grows roots. The city lights blinked like distant stars. I let the quiet wrap around me, warm and sure. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone's apology. I was finally free to build my own peace. 3 weeks passed before I realized I hadn't thought about Anthony for days. Not tried not to think about him, simply didn't. His absence had stopped echoing. I filled the silence with small rituals. Morning coffee by the window, a walk before work, evening sketch sessions with music low in the background. My life had narrowed into something quiet and deliberate, and for the first time in years, it fit. At work, I took on a new project, a community library renovation. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt meaningful. The kind of design that gave something back instead of just showing off. And without the constant emotional noise of Anthony's demands, my mind felt sharper. Ideas flowed. When my colleague Liam Tran stopped by my desk one morning, I barely looked up from my sketches. Hey, he said, leaning on the divider. You free for the site visit this weekend? I am now, I said, smiling faintly. He grinned. Perfect. You're better company than the interns. They think measuring walls is soul-crushing. I laughed genuinely. The sound surprised me. It had been months since laughter came easily. Saturday was cool and overcast. The kind of weather that smelled like fresh concrete and wet grass, my favorite. We walked through the old library, the floorboards creaking beneath our steps. Dust floated in the air like ghosts of forgotten stories. Liam listened intently as I explained my concept. Open skylights, natural light, soft colors. You design like someone who's been rebuilding herself, he said quietly. I met his gaze. He wasn't flirting. He was seeing. Maybe I am, I admitted. There was no tension, no performance. Just the soft, respectful silence between two people who didn't need to fill it. When we left, he offered me a coffee. We ended up sitting at a street cafe until the rain came down. Talking about architecture turned into talking about life, what it means to start over, to choose peace over chaos. He didn't try to touch me, didn't ask for anything. When we parted ways, he said simply, "You're easy to talk to, Jean." I went home smiling not because I felt desired, but because I felt understood. That night while cooking, I caught myself humming. A small, ordinary sound, but it startled me. It meant I was healing. I plated my dinner, sat down, and for the first time didn't glance at the empty chair across from me. It wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. Then the phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. My pulse faltered for just a second. I didn't want to look, but I did. Unknown. It's me. Please don't hang up. I stared at the screen, breath still. Then another message followed. Unknown. Jade isn't who I thought she was. She's not stable. I made a mistake. And another. Unknown. She threw something at me tonight. I'm done. I want to come home. Home. The word sent a strange chill through me. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned the phone over screen down on the table and continued eating. Each bite was slow, deliberate grounding. After dinner, I washed my plate, dried it, and tucked the phone into the drawer next to my old one. But the messages kept coming. I could feel the vibration against the wood. Unknown. Please, Jean. I need you. Unknown. You were my peace. I didn't see it before. Unknown. Please just answer me. Then, one final text. Unknown. She said I was the problem. Maybe she's right. I can't do this. I exhaled slowly, not out of fear, but out of release. For the first time, I realized I didn't need closure from him. His pain wasn't my victory, and his regret wasn't my responsibility. I opened the drawer and looked at the phone, still vibrating faintly like a trapped insect. Then I said it out loud, softly but firmly. You don't get to use me as your escape. And I turned it off. The next morning, the city felt lighter. The rain had passed. I opened the windows, brewed my coffee, and stood barefoot on the cold tiles, feeling the air rush in. In that still moment, I understood peace doesn't arrive with a grand finale. It sneaks in quietly, one breath at a time. When I sat at my desk, a new sketch waited for me, an unfinished design of an atrium filled with light. At the top, I scribbled a new note to myself. Design with clarity. Live with boundaries. I smiled, and for the first time, the foundation beneath me felt unshakable. It was early spring when the wedding invitation arrived. Lisa and Ben embossed in gold, the kind of envelope that pretends it isn't heavy with history. I almost didn't open it. Lisa was a mutual friend, and her parties had a reputation for drama, mine included. But something in me wanted to face it. Not out of revenge, not even for closure, but to prove to myself that I wasn't haunted anymore. I RSV'd yes +1. Liam smiled when I asked him to come. It's not a date, right? He teased. More like moral support, I replied. Then I'm honored, he said, his tone warm, easy. The day of the wedding was washed in soft sunlight. Rows of white chairs lined the vineyard, their shadows sharp against the green grass. The air smelled like new beginnings, ripe grapes, champagne, and something clean. As we walked in, people turned and smiled at me. The polite, curious kind of smiles that said, "You made it." Liam's hand rested gently on my arm, steady and respectful. He was calm in ways Anthony never was, no tension, no need to prove himself. When the ceremony began, I found my eyes drifting, scanning the crowd. And then I saw him. Anthony. He was standing near the back alone. His suit was too tight across the shoulders. His hair a little longer, but the arrogance that once filled every inch of him had drained away. His face looked older. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or longing, just recognition. When our eyes met, his expression fractured. He didn't expect me to look so steady. I turned back to the ceremony as the bride walked down the aisle. The reception was held inside a glass pavilion that shimmered under string lights. Music swelled, laughter echoed, and the smell of champagne hung in the air. Liam and I mingled, danced once or twice. I laughed freely, the kind of laugh that didn't need to convince anyone of anything. Then, while waiting for coffee at the bar, I felt a shadow at my side. Jean. That voice hesitant cracked. I turned. Anthony stood there, hands buried in his pockets, looking smaller somehow. His confidence had wilted into something brittle. "Hi, Anthony," I said evenly. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. "Can we talk, just for a minute?" I nodded toward the open lobby near the entrance, bright and quiet. "Sure, there's space over there." He seemed surprised I didn't refuse. We walked there in silence. The sound of laughter faded behind us until it was just the hum of distant music and the rustle of grapevines through the glass. He spoke first. "You look good. Really good." "Thank you. I didn't think you'd come," he said. "After everything." "I almost didn't." He nodded, staring at the floor. "I guess I deserve that." There was a long pause. Then he looked up, eyes glassy. "I messed up. You know that, right?" "I do." I thought I wanted excitement, passion, fire. But it was all noise. You were the calm I needed, and I treated it like a cage. His voice broke slightly on that last word. Jade. She wasn't what I thought. I stayed too long. I became someone I hated. I listened. The old me would have tried to comfort him, patch him, fix him. The new me just let the silence hold his confession. He stepped closer. "I never stopped thinking about you. Every time I close my eyes, I hear your voice. You were home." "Home," I repeated softly. "That's what you called me when it was convenient. But homes aren't built for people who keep setting fires inside them." He winced. "I'm not proud of what I did," he said. "But I've changed. I swear I have." Before I could answer, I saw movement from the corner of my eye. Liam had walked up, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He looked between us, but didn't interrupt. Anthony followed my gaze, his jaw tightening. "So this is him." "Yes," I said. "This is Liam." He gave a stiff laugh. "You moved on fast." I smiled faintly. "Healing isn't about speed, Anthony. It's about direction." That silence again, sharp and heavy. He looked desperate now, his composure cracking. "You're really choosing him over me." I shook my head. "No, I'm choosing me." The words landed like a quiet verdict. Final. Anthony blinked, disbelief giving way to something else, loss maybe. The kind that's too late to undo. He whispered, "I never thought you'd stop loving me." "I didn't stop," I said. "I just stopped waiting for you to deserve it." For a long moment he didn't move. Then almost mechanically he nodded and walked away. I watched him go, not triumphantly, not regretfully, just peacefully. Liam handed me the champagne. "You okay?" I smiled. "Better than I've been in years." We walked back into the reception together. The music swelled again, soft, timeless. I looked around at the lights, the laughter, the reflection of glass, catching the sunset. Anthony had once been the center of my world. Now he was just part of its background noise. Liam leaned in slightly. "What are you thinking about?" I glanced at him, then back toward the door where Anthony had vanished. About how sometimes I said the most powerful thing you can do is walk away quietly. He smiled. Sounds like an architect's kind of wisdom. I laughed this time freely, genuinely. Outside, the vineyard. Lights shimmered, and the night air felt alive again. When we left later, Liam held the door open for me. I stepped out into the cool air and took one last deep breath of freedom. Behind me, the faint sound of music drifted out into the dark, carrying no weight anymore. Ahead,